And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off.
Go ahead and say it, Ed. Go Tigers!
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
You like that? You like that?
F it. Jamar's down there somewhere.
The New Orleans Saints select Marcus Davenport.
No!
Splash Brothers. Yeah.
It's playoff. Keep going, Brace.
The playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Fellowship in and Lord, just let us do whatever we can to use it in your name and spread your word however we can, Lord, and just help people reach you through that, Lord. And just please be with Norkay Meredith as she goes and is undergoing treatment, Lord, and for her very rare type of cancer as she's battling that. And please give her the strength and resiliency and courage and peace to handle whatever is thrown her way, Lord. If it be your will, just put your hand on her and heal her, Lord, and be with her family and give them strength and comfort as well. And also be with the Louisiana Tech stabbing victims, Lord, as their families as they continue to grieve and recover from that tragedy, as well as the Jonesboro shooting victims, Lord, as the tragedies that went on in a short period there, and just be with their families and as they grieve and recover, and just help them turn to you, Lord, in this time of tragedy, and just be with the people of Israel. And I know, as you have said before in your good book, Lord, that you're going to watch over and protect them. And please, I just want to let you know that we're praying for them and to help cease this violence, Lord. And also Mr. Jeff Kennedy, whatever medical problems he's undergoing, Lord, just want you to be with him. And then also Everett McCurry, Lord, he's just underwent a huge surgery that he needed to save his life, Lord. And just to help be with him and put your hand on him as he recovers, Lord. It's been very critical the last several days, but just be with him and his family as they're very near and dear to me, Lord, as just be with them and be with Everett and put your hand on him. And if it be your will, just heal him and help him pull through this, Lord. He'll have an amazing testimony. And Lord, just thank you for everything you continue to do for us. Please just let us continue to shine a light for you and serve in your name, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen. And this is our week 16 waiver wire edition. If you've made it this far and you're in the fantasy playoffs, congratulations. If you didn't and you're still listening, but you're still playing, good for you. If you do, or if you are out there listening and you didn't make the playoffs, but you're still playing, that's what I like to hear. Because there's nothing worse than somebody in a fantasy league that just gives up at the end. And maybe you have something that rides on it toward the end, like a lot of fantasy leagues do, some kind of penalty for last place, or a lot of my fantasy leagues that I'm in, we do, like, we pick next year's selection for the draft. Our fantasy draft is based on our standings from the year before. So it's an incentive to try to increase your standings towards the end of the year. That way you get a better pick in the fantasy draft. So that's just a little tidbit on a lot of leagues that I'm in. But yes, if you're listening though, week 16, congratulations. There's a lot going on. It's getting critical. A lot of leagues are either in their semifinals or their finals coming into this week. I advanced in 3 of the 4 of my leagues. One league, I'm in the finals already. It's a 2-week final. And then a couple of other leagues, I'm in the semifinals. So really looking forward to that. I'm just going to share some waiver wire picks that I have at you for this week. And but first, I want to go over thank some of our sponsors: Big Reed BBQ, Automotive Detailing Solutions, This Little Piggy Barbecue Food Truck, Mimi's Children's Boutique, and Doug Damona Farm and Feed. We just want to thank all those. But our title sponsor for the episodes, Doug Damona Farm and Feed. It's a family-owned and operated farm and supply and nursery. There you can find a wide variety of pet and livestock feeds, supplements, vet supplies, plants, seeds, and fertilizer. They're located on Highway 167, just north of the Hodge Mill. You can be sure you'll be treated like family at Doug Damona Farm and Feed. from our family to yours. Thanks for your support and your business, and we thank y'all. It's still deer season, guys. If you need any of your deer hunting supplies, and I believe they have some of the just about anything you need, but just go out there, support them as they support us, and we appreciate you guys. And then just a couple news updates. Not a lot that I'm going to update here because this is early Tuesday. There's not a lot of updates from the weekend, but one that there is, Jamar Chase ended up getting ruled out last week during his game with an AC joint sprain. And Ian Rappaport even reported yesterday that he expects that he will miss Saturday's game versus Pittsburgh. But I don't know if that was jumping the gun or he's got some inside information, which he very likely might. But Coach Zach Taylor come out and stated after that he will be day-to-day currently, and they will see how the week goes before they rule him out. So depending on the severity of the AC joint sprain, I mean, I really can't see him playing if it's a fairly, even a mild sprain can be fairly painful, especially for somebody that catches the ball as their job. So I don't know where this is going, but if it was me and I had Jamar Chase made it this far, I would be I would make preparations not to have him next week. And then another one, Chris Olave. This is pretty relevant because the Saints play the Rams on Thursday night, and Chris Olave ended up getting ruled out or inactive last week with that ankle injury, and he did not practice on Monday. There's no new update as far as today, but this is very worrisome because they do play on Thursday night this week, and if he did not practice on Monday, I mean, I'd at least have to see at least a limited, if not full practice Wednesday and limited on Tuesday. So keep an eye on that if you have Olave like I do in one of my leagues. So just keep an eye on that. That's going to pretty much round out our news and updates. There weren't a tremendous amount of injuries this past week, thank goodness. But there are a few that we're going to relate to some of our waiver wire pickups. But we're going to jump right on into our waiver wire quarterbacks that we like this week. And number one's got to be Baker Mayfield. Honestly, he's been pretty consistent all year this year. And last week, if I'm not mistaken, he was the number one quarterback in fantasy last week with 45 points. And this week, he gets an excellent matchup against Jacksonville at home in a do-or-die situation for him and his team. Being the competitor that he is, I got a feeling he's going to show up big. Jacksonville's the 30th ranked secondary or 30th ranked defense against quarterbacks in the league, and he's playing them at home in a pretty much a stay alive game to try to make the playoffs as they're trying to stay in the playoff hunt. Or really, they've got the division locked up right now as long as they keep winning. But yeah, so because the Saints and the Falcons are kind of right behind them in that hunt in the NFC South for pretty much the dumpster fire of the NFC. But Baker Mayfield, number one, he's owned in 49% of leagues, going to playing at home against Jacksonville, big time streamer this week if he's available out there. Number two for me has got to be Joe Flacco again. I mean, the dude is just doing it left and right at the end of the season. And this week he's got the 22nd ranked pass defense of the Houston Texans at Houston. So in the dome, no worries on weather. His offense is pretty healthy. He is using David Njoku as we all expected David Njoku to be used his entire career. And it's working out great. Joe Flacco last week, 28 points. And this week gets another great matchup on the road in Houston. But, I mean, he is a top-notch streamer and maybe somebody to stream for the rest of the season, honestly, if you continue to play in the playoffs, because after Houston, he does get the Jets, but the Jets are pretty close to, I believe, being ruled out of contention for the playoffs. So if that's the case, they might be tanking for the rest of the season and improve their draft position. So that could be another good matchup. And if for some crazy reason you're playing in the playoffs the last week of the year, that's going to be at Cincinnati. But yeah, Joe Flacco's number two pickup for me. And then last but certainly not least, Nick Mullins. Only reason he's not higher is because his matchup is not near as good. But last week put up 23 points for Minnesota. stepping in for Josh Dobbs, who ultimately just exploded and fell flat on his face with the opportunity there in Minnesota. But Nick Mullins, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 6 rushes for 10 yards. You really like to see those 6 rushes because that means he's not afraid to run the ball. And this week, though, he's third for me because he's going up against Detroit, who is one of the tougher defenses against quarterbacks in the league. And I'm sorry, not one of the tougher defenses. They're one of the tougher against the run. I apologize. But against quarterbacks, they're 23rd. But they've had a pretty solid pass rush, and that does worry me with Nick Mullins going up against Detroit. We will see how that goes, but I like Baker Mayfield and Joe Flacco a lot better, but Nick Mullins has got to be third. 3 really solid streaming options, and he's only owned in 6% of leagues, so he's out there in a ton. If you need a quarterback for this week, I would feel great about any of those 3 popping them in my starting lineup. That's going to round out our quarterbacks. I only listed 3 because they're 3 really good options. 2 of them are widely available, and those are the ones that I really feel the most comfortable about going into this week 16. And then we're going to jump right into our running backs. And like I've been saying the whole time, it's time to be looking at handcuffs, especially now before, if teams are clinching, they're going to be sitting their starters, or if they're getting ruled out, they might be playing some of these younger guys. So I'm not going to just talk about a ton because there's a ton that I'm going to list, but number one's got to be Ty Chandler. Really went off for Minnesota last week. It's a really tough matchup this week against Detroit, but you can't say enough about what he has done stepping in and really has looked what we thought Alexander Madison was going to look like, and come out and put up 26 points last week. But this week, Detroit, the number 1 run defense against running backs in the league. So a tough matchup, but man, he's only owned in 45% of leagues. And if for some reason they sit Alexander Madison again, or even if he comes back, I really think Ty Chandler is taking over this backfield. So he's my number 1 pickup. Number 2's got to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They're saying Pacheco's going to be coming back, but they said he had shoulder surgery for contusion. I'm just not, all the puzzle pieces aren't adding up with this because you don't really typically have a surgery for a contusion, much less come back in 2 weeks. But they said supposedly Andy Reid on Monday said that they expect Pacheco to suit up and play Monday night. If it's me, I'm not rolling the dice on that. I'm putting him on my bench, and if I have the opportunity, he will get ruled out before Monday night, I feel like, if he's not going to play. So I pick up Clyde Edwards-Helaire because he is getting 80% of that, 70% of that workload out of the backfield for Kansas City, and it's a plus matchup going up against the Las Vegas Raiders as they're 21st against running backs in the NFL. So love that matchup there. And number 3 is going to be Zamir White for me. Josh Jacobs ended up getting ruled out with that quad injury last week, and then he really showed up on Thursday Night Football for a lot of people, putting up, I believe it was somewhere around 18 points last week, and putting up around 18 points. Yep, or 17 and a half points. This week he's got Kansas City, who's kind of middle of the pack against the run defense, against running backs. But honestly, what is Las Vegas has nothing to gain by playing Josh Jacobs. So I fully expect Zamir White to get another opportunity, especially if Josh Jacobs isn't like 100% healthy. So Zamir White's number 3. Number 4 is going to be Trey Sermon, who seemed to get the bulk of the workload for Indianapolis whenever Zach Moss went down with that fluke arm injury. And I say fluke because they've already come out and said they fully expect him to suit up. But I'm putting him on this list just for some miracle that practice does not go as planned, and Jonathan Taylor's supposedly coming back, or possibly, they're going to see. So for some reason, if Moss and Taylor don't come back, Trey Sermon's going to be in for heavy workload at Atlanta, and he would be the one that I would want in that backfield. And that's going to round out my running backs that I for sure want off the waiver wire that I want to pick up. And honestly, Sermon could really be in with this next group, but just the fact that both those other guys are kind of injured right now, I put him in that one. But number 1, as far as I guess some deeper leagues and handcuffs to have, Chicago running backs, really just roll the dice. It's either going to be Roschon or Dante, but it's such a plus matchup this week. They're going up against Arizona, who's the 2nd worst run defense in the NFL. Right now, I believe Roschon is listed as to lead the backfield. Hang on, I'll tell you. I mean, I don't even know if Chicago knows who's going to lead their backfield. I'll be straight honest with you. But nope, Dante Foreman is projected the highest, and then right behind him is Roshan. So, I mean, honestly, I thought it was going to be Dante Foreman last week, and he got 6 carries for -6 yards at Cleveland. And then Roshan ended up getting put in there, and he had 5 carries for 36 and 4 catches for 24. So really right now, Roshan looks like the guy, but the last time I thought Roshan was a guy, Dante was a guy. Either way, one of them's going to get work. If you're desperate, I say pick up Roshan, throw him in there, but I mean desperate or deep league. Number 2's for me going to be Tajay Spears, because I got word, talked to a guy today that Tennessee was eliminated from the playoff contention today. So I say Tajay Spears is one that you definitely want to pick up. He's owned in 40% leagues, going up against Seattle this week, which is kind of a middle of the pack run defense, but definitely they're actually, I take back, I'm sorry, Seattle is at the bottom of the barrel run defense, 28th in the league against the running back. So Tajay Spears, if he gets a lot more work, could be in for a big day. And I definitely think they give him a more of a look going down the stretch, because there's no reason for them to run Derrick Henry anymore. And then number 3 at this handcuff column part right here is Chase Brown, who we've seen get a comparable workload out of nowhere for Cincinnati. And he is Joe Mixon's backup. But last week, it was pretty much a 60-40 split, Chase Brown to Joe Mixon on the 60 side. But if for some reason Cincinnati gets eliminated, I could see Chase Brown stepping in and being the guy for Cincinnati down the stretch. And they get a pretty decent matchup this week, a middle of the pack against Pittsburgh team that is 24th in the league against the run. So not a terrible matchup for Chase Brown. Then Rico Dowdle for Dallas going up against Miami. I mean, I've been talking about this guy all year, because if something happens to Pollard, I fully expect them to put in Dowdle, or for some reason, if they clinch their position and everything's locked in for them, they could rest him and Dowdle will be the man. He's owned in 8% of leagues also. And then last, but certainly not least, and this one could be higher. It's really hard to say because this backfield is hard to predict also, but Tyler Algier for Atlanta steps up and gets the lion's share of the running back work for Atlanta in front of Bijan out of nowhere, when Bijan was really getting all the work. And then all of a sudden, Tyler Algier steps in and gets way more work this past week for Atlanta than Bijan did. And he's owned in 37.5% of leagues. But if for something comes out about some injury or something, you're going to want to have this guy because he's going to get the workload. He got 14 carries last week and a catch. I mean, it ain't nothing to write home about, but if he's getting the workload, they're going up against Indianapolis, and they're 30th ranked in the league against running backs. So it's a good matchup for Algier. So he's definitely last, but certainly not least, as somebody I would pick up for down the stretch just in case. And that's going to wrap up our running backs. We're going to roll right on into our wide receivers. And number 1's got to be Noah Brown. And I'll be honest, I dropped him in one league because I found out C.J. Stroud was not going to be starting. I was like, man, I don't want anything to do with this offense. And I think I might even said that on the pod. Well, Noah Brown comes out with Case Keenum, who I did not know was going to be starting. I thought they were going to start Davis Mills, but Case Keenum ended up starting, who's actually comparable decent backup quarterback, and he showed up several times throughout the last several years and kept offenses in it fantasy relevant. So he comes out against Tennessee, 11 targets for Brown, 8 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown. I mean, definitely somebody I would have been happy to have in my lineup. Now this week is a tough matchup against Cleveland, but honestly, I mean, if he's getting 11 targets, it doesn't matter who he's playing. It's going to have a decent volume floor. And Nico Collins has got the same calf injury he missed some time for earlier in the year. I find it hard to believe for them to rush him back with that same injury if they have a decent shot at making the playoffs, because they're going to want him healthy. And then also if C.J. Stroud comes back, that's even better news for Noah Brown. So I am all on board with Noah Brown. And honestly, for the rest of the season, because he's got Cleveland, but then he's got Tennessee, then he's got Indianapolis to finish out the season. That's some more good matchups. So Noah Brown's got to be number 1 for me. Number 2 is going to be Curtis Samuel, who has just continued to put up solid numbers down the stretch for the last 3 weeks. This past week, 5 for 41 with 9 targets, but 2 touchdown catches. So they're looking for him in the red zone. This week, he gets a tough matchup technically against the Jets. But with the Jets, I'm pretty sure they got eliminated from playoff contention also earlier this week. So what do they really have to play for? But also, Curtis Samuel technically is the number 3 wide receiver on this team. So he's going to get their third corner, and they have 2 stud corners, which is going to force a lot of the looks to their third option, which is going to be Curtis Samuel, because he's going to have the best chance to beat the third cornerback on that team. So, I mean, and like I've been saying for a pretty good bit now, they've had some tough matchups, but Curtis Samuel is going to be the one that's going to excel in these tough matchups because he's going to have the easiest matchup of the 3 wide receivers on that team. So I like Curtis Samuel a lot. He's owned in 42.3% of leagues. Number 3 is going to be Tyler Boyd, and that's strictly because of the Jamar Chase injury. Tyler Boyd owned in 42.5% of leagues. Now, this is kind of a wild card because we don't know how he's going to do with Jake Browning, but they're going to be at Pittsburgh this week. And being at Pittsburgh, hang on one second. Let me find that. There we go. They're 15th, so they're middle of the pack against wide receivers. They're 15th ranked in the league, so it's not going to be the best weather either in Pittsburgh this time of the year. It's probably not going to be as good of a streamer with Boyd as if we had Burrow, but we've seen Jake Browning be very serviceable as a backup quarterback and a fantasy supporter of this offense. So Tyler Boyd being a number 3 option because, I mean, we've seen his ability. He can go off if he has the opportunity. So I would definitely scoop him up. And if you're hurting, I mean, I think you could do worse than picking him up and starting Tyler Boyd this week at Pittsburgh. Number 4 is going to be Wan'Dale Robinson for me. A lot of analysts and people are picking Darius Slayton because he had a big week last week, but he just had a couple big plays. But we've seen Wan'Dale Robinson be pretty much the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. And now that they got Darren Waller back, I think that's going to help Wan'Dale Robinson out on the outside a lot more because Waller's going to take away it's going to get a lot more attention in the middle of the field. So I like Wan'Dale Robinson. He's owned in 6% of leagues, but they're going up against the best secondary matchup you can have, and they're going up at Philadelphia. And Tommy DeVito has been slinging the rock, and he showed that he's not afraid to throw it deep, and Wan'Dale Robinson can go up and get the ball. And he is extremely athletic. They've ran the ball with him some. I just like this matchup a lot. I like him a lot better than Darius Slayton. And I think he's the bigger playmaker. And he's young. He's had some injuries and injury history in his young career. But to me, I'm picking Wan'Dale Robinson to come out of this wide receiver room to have a big game at Philadelphia this week. And then number 4 for me has got to be Dontavion Wicks. This is strictly a injury-based pick that has a caveat or a contingency on Jaden Reed and Christian Watson being out. If both of them are out, I'm picking Dontavion Wicks. He's going to have a big week against Carolina. He's only owned in 3% of leagues he's at Green Bay, if you don't know who he is, sorry. But Jaden Reed got hurt with a toe injury, left the game late last week. And there's been a lot of analysts saying that it didn't look good. Christian Watson been battling that hamstring issue. I mean, who knows if he's going to come back or not. I would keep an eye on both of them, but if neither one of them play, it would not hurt to pick up Dontavion Wicks and see where he sits at the end of the week. And he could definitely be somebody you stick in at your flex and have a big week for Green Bay because he had a pretty solid week this past week. That's Dontavion Wicks from Green Bay. And then last but certainly not least, a guy that's been on this list a lot this year, but Demario Douglas. He's last because last week, honestly, they didn't use him quite as much as I was hoping they were going to. But sorry, hang on, let me find his projection here. That way I can tell you about what he did. Anyway, last week, very underwhelming. But this week has a pretty tough matchup at Denver. I don't know because he plays a lot out of the slot. I don't know if he's going to get Patrick Surtain from Denver or not. But last week, only 5 targets, 3 catches for 33 yards. But I mean, he missed 2 weeks in a row. Let's chalk that up to some rust. I'm not giving up on him yet. Demario Douglas, though, for New England going up against at Denver, I really think this could be a game where obviously New England's probably trailing most of the game, and And I think that could be in the benefit of Demario Douglas, and I think he could end up surprising some people here late in the fantasy playoffs. So, and that's going to round out my wide receivers, and we're going to roll right on into our tight ends. And honestly, several decent options at tight end this week. With the number one being Isaiah Likely, showed up and showed out again this past week. And I would like to say that he's starting to seem like a fair comparison to, he is no Mark Andrews, don't get me wrong, but he's kind of picking up his slack. This past week, 6 targets, 5 catches for 70 yards, another touchdown. He looks like the Mark Andrews replacement, and he's owned in 52.6% of leagues. Tough matchup this week at San Francisco, but I don't care because he's getting targeted. He's got that role. As long as he's still producing, I think he is a must-start option at tight end. Number 2 for me, a better streaming option is Hunter Henry, owned in 17.5% of leagues. But this past week, 9 targets, 7 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown. Now, he did leave the game with a knee injury, so keep an eye on that. But if he ends up being active, I think you could do a lot worse than picking up Hunter Henry and possibly starting him because he's got a pretty solid matchup this week at Denver, who's 31st in the league against tight end. Now, if for some reason Hunter Henry ends up getting ruled out, or Mike Gesicki is there, we know he's an athletic pass catching tight end, might be somebody to look at deeper leagues. But Hunter Henry's had 2 big weeks back to back, and it's a good matchup this week. If he ends up getting activated, he's okay. The knee injury's nothing. I say pick him up and play him. Number 3 is going to be Tucker Kraft for Green Bay. Not the volume I would like to see, but he is producing. He's honestly fairly close to what we were seeing out of Luke Musgrave before he got hurt. This past week, 6 targets, 4 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. And this week he's going up against Carolina, which is not the greatest matchup for a tight end because it's at Carolina and they're 6th ranked in the league against the tight end. But they're going to him in the red zone. If he's getting 5-6 targets a game, he's making a lot. He's averaging at least like 14.3 yards a catch the last 2 games. So I like Tucker Kraft. I think he is a decent streaming option down the stretch. I wish it was a better matchup, but next week he ends up getting Minnesota, who I believe is a better matchup. Yes, they're a much better matchup for him next week. So if he's somebody you might need next week, Tucker Kraft. Then number 4 is going to be Chig Okonkwo. For Tennessee, he's owned in 34% of leagues, and he's been serviceable. Not breaking down any records or anything like that, like you would probably hope. Definitely not Isaiah Likely, but I think you could do worse than Chig Okonkwo coming in here. He's got a pretty decent matchup this week against Seattle at home, which this is going to be a matchup where, they'll just let Will Levis throw the ball and see what happens. He only had 3 for 36 last week, 6 points. But that's kind of the average floor for your tight end around the league that you're happy with. And if he falls in the end zone, then you're talking about a top, 10 tight end minimum. So I like Chig Okonkwo a lot going up against Seattle this week. And then after that, let me see who he's got after Seattle. And then he's got at Houston. So, which is, a tougher matchup. He didn't have, it's a good matchup, but he didn't do that great against them this past week. But still, you could definitely do worse. And then last, but certainly not least on my list is Gerald Everett at Buffalo. Honestly, if it wasn't, at home against Buffalo, if it wasn't going against Buffalo, I'd have probably had him higher on this list. But they're ranked 10th in the league against the tight end. But Gerald Everett's an extremely athletic tight end. And the last 2 weeks, he's had at least 8 targets with 5 catches. And then 5 for 41 last week against Las Vegas in a blowout. He's definitely somebody, all it takes is a touchdown, and he's a top 5 tight end at least the last 2 weeks. So I like Gerald Everett a lot. He's got Buffalo, then he's got Denver, and then he's got Kansas City. So, honestly, if they let with the Easton Stick starting, and them, if for some reason Keenan Allen ends up getting ruled out, or, something happens there, Gerald Everett's definitely somebody that I would feel comfortable streaming here down the stretch. I think you could do worse with people on the waiver wire. K. Otton's another one that I didn't really have listed, but he has a decent matchup at home against Jacksonville. But we have seen him be so volatile this year, where especially even in good matchups, where it looks like he should really go off, and he really doesn't do much. And that's why I hate to not mention him because it's such a good matchup. Baker Mayfield's playing so well because he is playing like 100% of the snaps for the tight end for him, and it's a good matchup, but I would not get my hopes up. But that is Cade Otton. He's somebody else you could think about. And that's going to round out my tight ends, and we're going to jump right on into our streaming defenses I'm going to throw out here for you. I've actually had a fair amount of success picking some streaming defenses here lately because there's such a I guess there's enough data out there and enough baseline evidence for me to be able to pick who's going to have a decent defensive game against another offense. But number one for me has got to be Houston going up against Cleveland. And yes, Joe Flacco is a streamer for me, and he's been doing well, but he also turns over the ball, like I told you last week. And last week, even though Joe Flacco had a good fantasy week, he ended up giving up 16.92 points to Chicago. So Houston, they're going to be at home against Cleveland. And Houston's been a fairly serviceable defense. Last week, they put up 21 points at Tennessee. And they've been getting to the quarterback a lot. So I like the chances for them to get to Flacco. As long as he stays healthy, I think he puts up points. I think Houston's defense puts up points. So I like Houston's defense a lot this week at home versus Cleveland. Number two for me has got to be Chicago, who's been on fire the last several weeks. I mean, they've put up at least 16 fantasy points in standard leagues in the last 3 weeks. They've got 4, 7, 9 interceptions the last 3 weeks. 9 interceptions, guys, and at least 4 sacks the last 3 weeks. Okay, and that was against Detroit and Cleveland. This week they get Arizona. Yeah, that's right, Arizona, who's pretty much bottom of the barrel in everything. Who also just gave up 10 points to San Francisco, which is not great, but they're coming off a San Francisco game, and this is going to be at Chicago. I don't know how many people know, but this time of the year at Chicago is terrible. Cold, windy, good chance for some snow. I think it's a great game for Chicago's defense versus Arizona, who is a dome team playing in Chicago. I mean, all of it adds up to the Chicago's defense having a good day. The only reason that I don't have them above is because Kyler Murray is not as turnover prone as Joe Flacco. So I like Houston's defense better. And then last, certainly not least, it's got to be Denver's defense against New England because Denver, honestly, their defense has been a lot better of late. They didn't have a great week against Detroit, but before that, 19 points, 7 points, 20 points. And so they've been okay. Now, they didn't have a great game against Detroit, but this is a game against New England, who is the 29th in league against offense. I mean, for defenses to play against, they just gave up 11 to Kansas City, 6 to Pittsburgh, and then 21 to the Chargers, whose defense is a dumpster fire that we see Las Vegas just go off on. So give me Denver's defense at home against New England. Love it, especially in Denver this time of the year. And then that's going to round out my streaming defenses. All of those are pretty widely available, good options. So like those a lot. And then we're going to give you some streaming options at kicker. Kaimi Fairbairn for Houston at home versus Cleveland. Had a big week last week. He just came back from injured reserve. Matt Gay for Indianapolis at Atlanta in their dome. Atlanta is pretty solid against the run, and Indianapolis can move the ball fairly well, so that normally adds up for a lot of field goal opportunities for teams. So I like Matt Gay, even though don't be afraid. If you go back and look, he had a -6 game a couple of weeks ago. I don't expect that to happen again. He had a good, and if you throw that game out, he's been really good the last 5 or 6 weeks. And then last, certainly not least, a little bit higher owned, but still not over 60%, Jason Sanders for Miami. Tougher matchup, but going to be at home versus Dallas, who's a pretty solid defense in itself, but Miami is moving the ball well. So I think Jason Sanders stays on track and has another good week as a kicker. And that's going to round out my waiver wire pod for week 16. And I really appreciate everybody listening throughout the season. If you're still hanging in there, good luck this week. Don't forget to set your waiver wires. Don't forget we got Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, and Monday games. So set your lineups if you do Thursday before Thursday, don't forget to get on there Friday and set your lineup because games kick off Saturday as well. But thank you everybody for listening. Please like, subscribe, download, give us feedback, and give us some ratings on your podcast application of choice. We really appreciate y'all. Also, please remember our prayer requests that we talked about at the beginning of the pod. Just thank you for everything. Thank you to our sponsors. I appreciate everybody that listens, and y'all keep chasing that trophy, and I'll come at y'all with y'all start, sit, sleepers at the end of the week.